So, did Trump cave and back down from his trade war? That's the subject of today's video. We'll go over this and what's happening in the markets. So, let's just jump right in. And this is the headlines from the Washington Post today. Did Trump cave on his Canada and Mexico tariffs? Now, to tackle this problem, I want to share a meme that I saw on social media from a friend. This is Trump's decision making process. One, I make a stupid decision, okay? Two, something really bad happens, right? The market crashes, or people don't like me, someone says a bad meme, whatever, something bad happens. Number three, I convince my followers the problem is magically solved. And then number four, I reverse my decision. So that is the Trump way of doing business. And in fact, we actually had our people in our community call this out also. This is Mary. Mary says, the real reason Trump paused the tariffs was that they were starting to cause the stock market to crash. It was affecting the pockets of his rich friends. Good. We also have this. This is from Ophelia. Ophelia says, Canada and Mexico made no concessions they weren't already prepared to give. The, quote, deals the dictator of the U.S. made, referring to Trump, were what the two countries were doing anyways under Biden. Donnie says, Mexico and Canada gave him the same, quote, deal they gave Biden in December. Trump capitulated and basically claimed credit for deals already in the works. I checked it out. That's why I mentioned in this Washington Post article. The writer of the article actually agrees with our commenters in our community. So I concur. So guys, this is what I try to do every single day, is just go through everything and make sure that we're having real discussions about this. So this was the article's comment. Said, and it's a far cry from how Trump has sold the importance of fentanyl from Canada, which includes false statistics. Of course, that's what Trump does, uses false data. And says, in other words, Trump has tried to set this up to look like a much bigger win than it really is, which as ever appears to be one of his overriding priorities, right? Try to always make himself better than it actually is happening, or essentially trying to sell you a dream that may not necessarily be true. And I actually think this particular chart really captures Trump's leadership. Again, he makes a stupid decision, something bad happens, he convinces followers that everything's solved, and then he reverses said decision. Another headline, the bond market is signaling two things about Trump's second term. So I'll give you the basic gist of it is people are saying, hey, there may not be that much more upside in the stock market. If you can get some, good returns in bonds, be it 4 or 5%, something, around that nature, take it, right? It is guaranteed money. We may see some weakness towards the end of the year. So that's sort of what we're seeing. On top of that, I show you guys this chart every now and then talking about stocks. So again, bonds, you can just take that steady return if you can. In terms of stocks, we are pretty overvalued. This is the Shiller PE ratio. I see a reading of 37.81, which is really high. I always tell you the same thing. If this thing ever hits 40, probably best time to be getting out of the market. If you don't understand what this means, it's basically what are price of stocks compared to how much money companies earn, right? So are you overpaying for the performance of companies? Essentially what we're talking about here. And speaking of performance of companies, again, we're all overvalued in the market here. Google just reported their earnings and not so great. So headlines were revenue growth slows, sending shares down. And I think they're have a bunch of spend on AI, and it really hurt them before. If you guys remember, DeepSeek, which is that Chinese one, came out and was like, hey, we can do things a lot cheaper than the Americans. So that's going to put pressure on the American companies again. And this is missing Wall Street estimates. Now, it's not just tech that's struggling. And again, you have to tie this to the market because essentially, is the market overvalued or not? And then you see our companies making a bunch of money to justify the price you're paying for stocks. So as Google, they're not, right? They're missing expectations. Chipotle just announced, it says here, Chipotle sales miss shows burrito chain's growth is slowing, right? So they're slowing down as well. The last couple of years, though, Chipotle stock has done fantastic. They did really, really well in the pandemic. And I can tell you, I contributed to Chipotle's success. I was ordering so many burritos in the pandemic. I was all about the burritos. I don't know if you guys did there was a taco hack thing. I didn't do it myself, but I think the deal was if you ordered the taco bowl and the tortillas separately, it was actually cheaper than just ordering a burrito. I think it was something like that. And I was not smart enough to figure that out. And then by the time I figured it out, I guess they changed the pricing so you couldn't do it anymore. But point being, though, Chipotle is slowing down in terms of their revenue performance, and so is Google. And then you're also seeing the same kind of thing from AMD. So you're going to see that around the market. whether or not stocks are doing good or not. There's a couple that are doing good, which I'll show in a moment here, but I want to try to put it all in context. There's going to be some pressure also on tech companies as China is still in a trade war with USA. So Canada and Mexico, there's a 30-day pause. So we'll see if there's going to be, any sort of more announcements of tariffs or whatever in 30 days. I don't know. We'll find out. But in the China situation, China's already saying, hey, we'll put some tariffs on American goods and we'll fine/investigate some of your companies. So now it's Google, NVIDIA, and Intel are on the list. Whether or not, these investigations have any, legitimacy to them, it doesn't matter. It's the Chinese government. They can do whatever they want. And this is just part of how the game is played. So there's that. And then we got to talk about the job market. So this was the headlines I mentioned before in the prior video, but I want to go over it again. Job openings fall close to 4-year low. Finding work gets harder, right? And this was the other one, as I mentioned in the last video, was basically people are quitting their jobs less because there's less chance to find a job that pays more, right? So generally speaking, if you quit, you're like, hey, I'm going to go find something else, or I already got a better offer, but less people are doing that. This is the chart that I wanted to show you before. I didn't get it in the last video, but it's right here. But basically, you can see it. This is the amount of jobs that people quit. Now, here's the thing with whenever you look at numbers with unemployment, that stuff like that. Yes, there may be a job out there, but it may not necessarily be the job that you want. So, for example, let's say you quit your job, at the bank, or you quit your job in the government or something of that nature, and hey, you get a job at working at fast food. So it's probably not going to pay that much, right, in comparison to what you had. So unemployment numbers don't necessarily always reflect the full story or job openings. It all depends on your neck of the woods and what you're looking for. Generally speaking, it's been like this for a while. Healthcare is hiring. They just always are going to need people. And I think that's going to be something that if you ever, really need a job, and some of those jobs are quite good, actually, to be perfectly frank. And I mention that one all the time. I think skilled labor jobs are still going to be in need for, years to come, where there's never going to be a time where we don't need people to do plumbing and people to do carpentry and do good work and that kind of stuff. So there's various jobs out there, but I'll just say, it depends on your situation. And I do see that it's like tech and finance stuff, are slowing. And this all relates to sort of, as the economy feels as a whole, because the companies basically have to predict, okay, what's business going to be in the future? Do we want to hire more people or not? And then you got the whole Musk and the Trump stuff. So here's an example of a stock that is absolutely surging. So if you're in this thing, congratulations. It is a meme stock, so I don't talk about it all day, every day on the channel. Some channels devote themselves just to this stock. There are channels out there that do that. This is called Palantir. It was up 25%, I guess, in the after hours or something. They had a decent earnings. But really what this is all about is this is a Peter Thiel connected company, which is one of the buddies of Elon Musk. The whole bet is that Elon Musk is going to fire all kinds of people in the government and replace government people with AI and automation or whatever. And I guess theoretically, Palantir is going to get all of these government contracts. So you're betting on corruption from Elon Musk if you're in this thing. It's way overvalued based on how much money they make. I think their P ratios are in the hundreds. It's like ludicrously high. But I understand, there are meme stocks out there. There are cryptos out there the same way that Tesla. So it's that kind of stock, but I do see it. But that's the kind of stuff that's doing well in this market. Daly, who's one of the Fed, they made a statement recently regarding whether or not they're going to be cutting interest rates, basically saying, hey, we'll wait. I'll read the actual quote. It says, there's a lot of uncertainty, and this is, again, Fed Daily. We can take our time to look at what's coming in, both on the economy and any policy changes. We don't need to be preemptive. And basically, you follow the Fed when you follow the markets, because are we cutting rates? Are we making it easier to borrow money? Do we want to spur growth? Are we going to keep rates the same, right? Everything's okay. We're not really oppressive Fed. We're not like a accommodative Fed. Things are okay. So they're saying we're just going to go ahead and wait. Now, every market is going to be a little bit different on what they want. Generally speaking, Wall Street always wants lower rates, borrow more money, get the engines going, etc. Home builders is an interesting one. So they were talking about here that there's homes in, say, Florida and Texas, and basically the home builders have to give incentives. It's something like 10% incentives to get people to buy homes, meaning basically that eats at their profits. There's a couple things that you could think about here. Is one, should we build more houses to bring prices down, because then we have more inventory? But you have to give people incentive to do that sort of thing. Often what's going on right now is there's kind of a mismatch of what people are looking for, where the prices are at, and et cetera. If you were to lower rates, that would theoretically, I say theoretically because it all depends on what people are feeling, but would increase demand because it's easier to borrow money, rates are lower, you have more money to borrow said things. But prices are still very, very high. So another way to think about it is if you keep interest rates higher, it's harder for people to get loans, right? Then the demand would actually decrease, and so home prices should come down. It's hard to read, but I say it should because you're like, Chris, what are you talking about? Home prices are still high. Well, it depends which market you're in, and it depends what sort of situation that you're looking for. And this is it's like you can tell what's going to happen or should happen economically, but it remains to be seen, and that's sort of why we look at this stuff together. I'm just letting you know that this is a situation to where the home builders are saying home prices are too high and we got to get people through the door, so we're giving them 10% discounts, that kind of stuff. So eating at their profits. On top of that, we're entering into like a deregulatory sort of environment, and another way that companies/banks can boost their profits is I won't say corruption is the exact word. I'll just say deregulations, and maybe another way to think about it is like passing the cost on to the consumer in a way. So, for example, and it's like, how do you explain this one? So Wells Fargo does some shady stuff, we'll put it that way, with mortgages, etc. And should we crack down on them or not? Well, this is what the headlines read, and I read through it. I guess they have like 5 charges or something against them. But it says here, Wells Fargo clears another post-scandal regulatory hurdle, but more remain. But the way it was kind of written is that maybe we're not going to enforce these so much. And that's positive for the banks, maybe not so great for the consumer. But this is, again, what the Musk and Trump want is deregulation. And this was also coincided with something that I read about this. This is the CFTC. I think it's the Commodities and Trading Commission or something like that. And they're reorganizing their regulatory stuff. When you read the language of what they're doing, so to me, it sounds like they're going to be gutting the industry, but or gutting the agency, I should say. But when you actually hear the language, it's really strange. So I'll read it and see if you guys can understand it, and you'll see what I mean. So it says here, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission is reorganizing its enforcement division, right? So how do we enforce, regulations and cut down on fraud, crime, etc. And a move, it said, it will end the practice of regulation by enforcement. So that's what they're saying here. End the practice of regulation by enforcement. It's such a weird language. The derivatives market regulator and said previously task force will be simplified into 2 new units of the division, the Complex Fraud Task Force and the Retail Fraud and General Enforcement Task Force, okay? And then that is the quote. This simplified structure will stop regulation by enforcement and is more efficient. I don't know. It just, so what does that mean? Are you not doing anything and that's how you're more efficient? Like the language is so bizarre. In the articles, I read a couple of these things, and they just repeat the language of the CFTC. I don't know if anyone understands what this actually means. This is their language. This simplified structure will stop regulation by enforcement and is more efficient. That's what they say. So, when I put it all together of what's happening, I'll try to sum it up. Revenue is falling at Google. Revenue is down at, say, Chipotle. So they're not doing so well. They're not meeting Wall Street expectations, a better way to put it. And then, the companies that are doing well, something like a Palantir, which is in anticipation of corruption. A housing market is, people find houses too expensive, so home builders have to give discounts to people, right? People are concerned about whether or not they can change jobs, so they may be staying put. And then you're talking about regulations where maybe we're not going to enforce regulations on the banks, so maybe they'll cheat consumers more and whatever. And then you have the CFTC, which regulates some trading, but from the way that I read it, it looks like their regulations aren't going to be so stiff. That's how I read that. So that's what's going on in the markets. In my opinion, this stuff, if you can take 4 and 5% fixed returns, take some of that. Just diversify. Don't throw your eggs in one basket. But I wouldn't necessarily putting all my stuff in meme stocks, meme coins, or whatever. The market appears to be overvalued, so be careful out there. I personally think index funds are fine, or if you want to do balance index fund, which is another great way to do it. So you're mixing in some bonds with your index. Pay off your debts, have some cash set aside, make sure your job is doing great, and also hang out in this community. We talk about the markets every day, And I always appreciate your time. So thanks again, and I'll catch you all in the next video.